Hey, are you confused by how to create the ideal EverWebinar session? Well, fear not, I'm going to show you exactly how. Let's go. All right, welcome. Now, EverWebinar is a really powerful platform for running automated webinars and training sessions, but it can be a bit confusing in selecting how to configure all of those different options for a brand new session. So I'm going to go over there to my computer and show you exactly how to get cracking. You ready? Let's do it. Alrighty, let's dig in. So first of all, I want to show you the landing page for my automated webinar session to give you a little bit of context around what I'm going to be going through, okay? So this is basically a session where I'm going to be talking about how to do content marketing well. And I call it a free training. I don't like to call these sessions webinars because webinar assumes, I think for most people, that it's a live session, and it's not. It's an automated session, okay? Now, there are some people who will run automated webinars and pretend to be live, right? They'll pretend to refer to people as if it's live in the chat, and they'll fake the number of people that are joining the session. Do not do this. It's an objectively terrible thing to do because you're lying and deceiving people, and it's the wrong thing to do, okay? EverWebinar has got tools and facilities to enable that kind of fakery, but please don't do it, okay? It doesn't make the world a better place, all right? I'm not going to go through the landing page here because that's a whole separate video that I could go through, but you can see here that there's the embeddable blue bar, which shows when the next session is going to be, okay? And I've embedded that on my web page, and I'll explain how to use your own page for a landing page in just a second, okay? Now, if I go into EverWebinar, okay, I'm going to go through the full configuration of how I've set up this EverWebinar session, and so you can kind of take some pointers for what might be right for you. But just before we go on, I want to click on my webinars, and this is the session at the top, and I want to click on your links, and if you go to embed on website, this is where you can get the code that you'll embed on your website to generate that blue bar, okay? So that's how you make sure that you've got the registration thing that pops up. Like if you click on this, it'll pop up the box, all right? Okay, just wanted to get that out of the way. All right, so let me get rid of this and then go back. Now you'll see here that I got V1, V2. One thing you're definitely gonna wanna do with your automated webinar sessions is to test them, okay? Have one session and then see how well it performs, and then make changes to your session or your offers or whatever you're putting in there, okay? And I've been doing this. I didn't just change the content in my webinar, but I also changed the offer as well. So just to give you a bit of context around this session, what happens is people go and register for this, they come to my session, I walk through a whole load of really valuable content for how to do content well, and at the end of it, I provide an offer where they can go and buy a training course and a whole load of benefits, okay, a whole load of bonuses, all right? The reason why I'm mentioning that right now is because I'm going to talk about, you know, this additional material that I include in my session in the configuration. All right, so let's click on edit and go through each of these one by one. To keep this relatively short, I don't want this video to last forever, I'm going to skim over some of the obvious pieces here so we've got more time to discuss the things that are probably going to be confusing you and other people who are watching this video a bit more. So when we go into configuration, first of all, you're going to put in your source video, okay? I would always recommend you have an external video file. I host mine on Vimeo. It's a good hosting service. There's options inside of Vimeo where you can turn off the play bar and the branding and all that kind of stuff, so it looks like just a blank video. And then you put in the duration of your video into this box here, okay? You can also, in the basic settings, go and put some information about your webinar. I don't really bother very much in obsessing over this. You can list it in the on-demand section, but I don't really think that makes much of a difference. I've not noticed any traffic from there. And then you can select who's on the session and your webinar presenters. And for me, it's just me. Okay, so pretty straightforward stuff in the configuration section. Now in the schedule section, this is where you decide how often your automated webinar is going to be happening. And there's a lot of options that you can select from in here. So one thing you can do is go and add specific times here. So for example, I did some research and I found that most webinars tend to be most popularly attended when they're at 11 a.m., 2 p.m. and 8 p.m. Okay, so I experimented with that and I got okay results. What I found works really well is if you select the next available session where it runs the webinar every 15, 30, 45 and on the hour, okay? So as you can see here, my next session is going to be happening in 5 minutes and 14 seconds, which as you can see from my clock up here, is going to be at 5:30 p.m. and then it will reset the clock for the next 15 minutes, okay? I found that I get much better results from this. If you go with this every 15 minutes, what happens is you get a lower level of people registering for your session because they might not have the next hour available when they see your page, but a much higher attendance rate, and that's ultimately what I wanted, okay? All right. Now, this is an interesting thing that I've turned on as well, that if as it says here, if someone arrives at the registration page a few minutes before the webinar, they can join the event quickly instead of having to wait for the next session. I think that's just a good thing to switch on. And then I've left most of this is pretty stock, all right? So pretty straightforward stuff. Now, in terms of registration, as you can see, I have my own registration landing page. It's running on my own website at jonobacon.com. Now, the good news is that in WebinarJam, you can select from a whole load of different templates that they've got in here, which is perfectly fine if you don't have a website. But if you go to your own design and click and customize, then you can pop in the URL for it, which is this URL, okay? And make sure that if you select that option, that you embed the blue bar that I mentioned earlier on, okay, and put that in there, all right? So I would generally recommend you use your own website. I think it makes it look much cleaner and consistent, but if you can't do that, no big deal, okay? You can also select in here registration form design, and there's lots of different options here in forms. I haven't really experimented a lot with this. I found that the default form option works pretty well for me, and it works pretty well on mobile. And then you can select the form fields. This is a pretty weak part of the WebinarJam platform. I would like to be able to select custom fields from other platforms, but it doesn't enable you to do that. So I just literally ask for first name and an email. The fewer things you ask your audience for, the lower the friction, the higher your sign-up rate, okay? You can, of course, have in here whether it's free or whether you're going to charge a registration fee. I would never, ever charge a registration fee for an automated webinar session, so I always make that free. And then, of course, you can password protect it if you want. Again, I can't think of a reason why I'd ever want to do that outside of maybe a custom masterclass training session, okay? So pretty straightforward stuff there as well. Now, in terms of notifications, this is where you're going to want to make a key decision, okay? So what you've got here in terms of options is you can either use EverWebinar Mail, right? And if you select this, which I'll show you in just a second, you can configure which emails come from EverWebinar that will go to your audience. So this will be things, for example, an email that goes to your audience when they register for your session, and an email that will go out 10 or 15 minutes before the session to remind them, okay? Now, I personally use ConvertKit, and what I've done is if I click on edit in here, you can create custom fields in your email platform, and then you can map them to the session. So for example, you can see here, I've got a custom field in ConvertKit called CCC Live Room Link. And what happens is when I set this as the field in EverWebinar, when somebody registers for the session, the actual link to the live room will be put into that custom field in my email service. So this means that I can reference that URL and send emails from there. I'll have a separate video that explains how to do this, so don't worry too much about that. If you've got an email autoresponder that you're using, you're comfortable with it, I definitely recommend this, so all of your emails coming from one place. But if you select EverWebinar Mail, then what it's going to do is it's going to enable you to then go and configure your specific notifications elsewhere. Okay, so we're going to click on cancel because I want to stick with my own autoresponder. All right, now if we go to integrations, again, I'm using ConvertKit. Now you may use one of a billion other autoresponders, but this is, again, I think really, really important, okay? So if I click on edit, this is where you can specify integration rules. So essentially what you're doing is you're saying, if this particular thing happens, then this other thing happens in my email autoresponder. So you can see the rules that I've set up. So if somebody registers, then it creates a tag in ConvertKit which says automated general reg, okay? So that's a tag that lives in that record that's created in ConvertKit. If they attend the live webinar, then it marks them as attend. You can see I've got the same thing at the beginning of each of these, and then the only thing that differs is the bit at the end, okay? So it essentially creates different tags in ConvertKit depending on what happens. Now, this is a very important thing to mention. If they register, then they get that tag applied instantly. If they attend the session, as soon as they attend, it gives them the attend tag, right? But if they miss the session, this will often arrive at some indeterminate point in the future. And I've seen it happen, it gets applied 2 hours later, 4 hours later, 5 hours later. So this will happen at some later point. Don't depend on that being applied to your session as soon as your session finishes, okay? And then you can also mark it as replay. And then also what I've got here is if they stay for at least 45 minutes, which is a big chunk of the session, then I mentioned that they stay for at least 75% of the session. This is actually an old tag because my session's a bit longer now, okay? So definitely make sure you set up those integration rules. Cancel that. And then what you're also going to want to do is to set up some third-party tracking. So this is where I put in here like Google Tag Manager, I've got like my Facebook pixel is in here because I'm running Facebook ads. This is where you can embed all of those snippets of code that you can put in there, okay? All right, now let's move on to the thank you page. All right, so the thank you page, this is again a consideration that you're going to want to make, okay? Now what you can do is you can use one of EverWebinar's default confirmation pages, right? Where if you confirm this, you can go and select what the confirmation page looks like and select from them, okay? But if you use your own custom page, then what happens is as soon as they register for your automated webinar session, it will redirect to this page. Now, I love this because I can have a lot more control over what goes on that page. Again, you have that consistency. However, you're going to have to be intentional about adding things like Facebook tracking events if you're going to be running Facebook events and things like that, or Facebook advertising. And what happens is when you go to that page, EverWebinar will pass a load of information on the URL that you can then pull and display on the page. I have a separate video that is linked somewhere around here that will explain exactly how to do that, okay? Super powerful technique. Because then what happens is everything's happening on your website, which I love. Now, the live section, this is one of the most important parts of how you create your automated webinar experience, okay? So first of all, you'll have a countdown page design, all right? Now you can see in here, I've selected this one. And if I click on customize, this is what it shows. It basically says, please stand by while the session's about to kick off. Big picture of me, all right? Now, what is the difference between a thanks page and a countdown page? So the thanks page is where people get redirected when they've confirmed the session, all right? What the countdown page is it's essentially the lobby. They'll sit here waiting as this ticks down here. And then when that has ticked down, it will automatically reload the page and they'll see a big play button that they click on to start the automated webinar session. Now, I wish that EverWebinar would just redirect directly to this page, but they don't seem to have that option. Okay, so I'm gonna cancel and exit. But you're gonna wanna select that and make sure you configure that. A lot of people don't configure this page and they've got lorem ipsum on there and that sucks. All right, now the webinar room design, this is basically some color schemes for what your actual webinar room looks like. Whatever, I don't care. I've basically got the basic one, you know, the base one. What you can also do is you can add in polls and quizzes. This is a really powerful feature. So you can add a poll in here, and then you can also configure when that poll is going to appear, which I think is really neat. So let me walk through as an example of this. So, you know, what is your fave color? Let's just go with that. Blue and red. Okay, so I'm going to create that. And then you can specify when does this appear in the video, and then when does it end in the video. So you can mention the timestamps when that poll is going to appear. Okay, and then yeah, you can add an option here where you can select at the end of the video, you'll make the results public. Okay, and you can, if you want, fake this. So don't do that. Stop faking. Faking is bad. Okay, let me get rid of that. All right, perfect. Now, the live chat box. This is really, really important. What you ideally want to do is have some live chat that appears in the session as they're going through it, okay? Now, what I did is I actually took the chat from a live version of this session that I did, and I basically adjusted the timestamps because my session was a little bit different because I was re-recording it, right? And I basically put them in there and removed some of the chat messages where I referred to the live session, okay? So I essentially repurposed my existing chat into the recorded session. And I also went and changed all the names because people wouldn't necessarily want their names being appearing. So the way I recommend you do this, download the chat from your live session if you do that, and then create it as a comma separated value file, and then go and do it there. It's going to be much easier to do it there instead of doing it in the interface here, and then import that from the CSV file, and then boom, you're going to be good to go. All right, dead simple to do. And definitely select this option, save real comments from real attendees, because as people go into the session and they start leaving comments, then it will appear in EverWebinar, right? And I'll show you exactly where it appears. If I go over to my webinars, you can see here there's a log option here. Well, it'll appear in here where there'll be pending chat where you can accept it, all right? So Really great way of adding those additional chat messages. Now, one thing I always do in my session is say, this is an automated session, but I'm including the chat from all of these different sessions. So every time I run one of these sessions, if people are going to be leaving comments and discussions, then I'll merge all of those comments in. So you get to see all of the chat from all of the sessions as opposed to chat from some of the sessions. What you also want to do in here is, and let me see if I can find an example of this, but you also want to go in and where there are questions, let me see if I can go further along, is actually go and respond to the questions, okay? People are going to be asking questions. Here we are. Jennifer asked a question, should I prioritize their pain points? And then I actually went and added in a response at that timestamp. So it's a great opportunity to add additional value in the chat because people like to read the chat when they're going through it, all right? Now, what you can also add in here are, well, let me just go back to that chat for a second. You can also disable the chat if you want, or you can have a display a question box, and then any questions will come to you via email. I would never disable the chat, and I don't really like this question box because what value is that? I mean, you could respond, but when are you going to be able to respond? You're going to be able to respond as soon as the question comes in. Now, in terms of highlighted announcements, this is literally, it does exactly what it says on the tin. You can pop up a highlighted comment at any particular point in the session, and you specify the time when that appears and how long it appears in terms of duration. I'd never use that. What I do use is a product offer. Okay, so this is where I've got my bundle offer, which I'm offering to my audience. So you can see here, I created an image, nice bright thumbnail, got the pricing in there, and then I've got the name of the offer headline that appears up here. This is basically a preview, and then some text there, and then here's the link that takes them to the special offer page, all right? And it opens up in a new tab. And then again, I can specify when that offer begins to be shown. So it starts being shown at 1 hour, 6 minutes and 7 seconds. And then I've set it to 000 because it will display until the end of the session, which I think most people will want. Now, what you can do is add an urgency here. So if you're selling something that they have to buy by the end of the session, then you can click on this and then you can specify how long they've got. But I don't like to do high pressure selling, so I don't enable that. Now you can add multiple different offers in there. It doesn't just have to be product offers, but multiple different offers in there that you can then show in your session. Now, the other thing that you can do here as well is have redirects. So, this can get your attendees to go to a specific URL at a specific time, and it'll open it up into a new tab. So for example, if you say, hey, go and check out my ebook, and I've opened it up in your browser, then it'll appear there. And be careful with this because on mobile, I think it can be a little bit clunky at times, all right? Sticky messages is where you can have something appear at the top of the chat box at a specific time. So for example, I've got a bonus that I'm offering my potential customers that isn't quite ready yet. So I'm saying it's going to be released on the 10th of May, 2021 as part of the package. This means I don't have to mention that date in the session and then re-record my video, all right? So I just display that, and then once I've released that into the bonus package, then I'll just go and delete this. And that means that my attendees get to see that. So I'm, for the 1 minute and 10 seconds that I'm talking about that particular bonus, then it appears there, all right? Here you've got display the number of attendees. Now, again, this gets back to authenticity. I switched this off, right? Now, what you can do is you can specify a number of attendees that are in the session, or you can specify dynamic attendees that makes it look like people are joining and leaving. I think if you enable these two, you're being fake, okay? Don't be fake. I know I've said this a couple of times already now, but we've got to run this planet on a position of authenticity where we can, okay? So be honest and just don't display the attendees. I don't think it's going to make a huge amount of difference. What you can also specify in here are sales notifications where you can say, okay, if somebody bought something, it'll pop up a thing saying blah, blah, blah purchase, blah, blah, blah purchase, blah, blah, blah purchase. This does actually have a huge impact on whether people buy. But again, I've disabled this because I don't feel like it's the honest thing to do. I'm kind of on the fence about this because on one hand, if somebody did buy it in the session, I think it's okay to do that. But on the other hand, I think, well, hang on, they bought it in that one session. They didn't buy it in every single session. So I've got this disabled until I've figured out what I want to do there. And then the other thing here on this page is file handouts. So I provide some downloads as I'm going through the session. So for example, when I'm talking about audience personas at one point in the session, I have that. And you can add these, and it's pretty much the same kind of situation. You can upload the file by clicking on that button, pops up a box where you can drag in the file. And then here's when the handout appears and here's when it ends. And it will pop up a box as you're going through the session. This is a really nice feature. It's really dynamic. It makes the session feel much more engaging. And then just to finish off a couple of things, we've got the replay. So you can specify whether attendees are going to get a replay session. If you don't want a replay, that's fine. I like to have a replay option because I found that you'd actually get a reasonable chunk of traffic going there, especially if you point them towards the replay from your email. So I like to record the webinar session, and then you can specify how long they've got. I would definitely set an expiration date. So I've specified 100 hours. And in my emails, I basically say, you got a couple of days to go and watch it, but it's going to expire. So if you add a little bit of a scarcity event, then they're going to be more likely to go and watch it, which I think is perfectly fine. And then you can also allow people to submit questions via the replay that will go to you via email. So I've enabled this in the replay because I don't think they're going to be expecting to get a response immediately, like with the automated session. So I've enabled that, but I basically get no questions pretty much ever. And then you can click on finish and boom, you're good to go. Alrighty, my friend, I hope you found that useful. If you did, hit that like button and of course click that subscribe button and the little notification bell to be notified when more of these videos come out. Alrighty, peace out.